Sometimes the most ordinary Tuesday can become the day that rewrites your entire future. Sarah Martinez never believed in fate until she found herself stranded on Highway 011 with a flat tire, her phone dead, and storm clouds gathering overhead. She was about to discover that the worst moments can lead to the most beautiful beginnings. What started as a simple act of kindness from a stranger named David would spiral into a love story that defied every expectation. Two people from completely different worlds, brought together by a moment of vulnerability and genuine human connection. But love isn't always easy, and sometimes the very thing that brings you together can threaten to tear you apart. This is the true story of how a flat tire became the foundation of a love that would survive family disapproval, career challenges, cross-country moves, and the ultimate test of commitment. It's proof that sometimes the universe has plans far greater than our own, and that the person meant to change your life forever might just be the one who stops to help when everyone else drives by. Are you ready to believe in the magic of unexpected encounters and the power of taking chances on love? Sarah Martinez gripped the steering wheel tighter as her Honda Civic began to pull to the right. The unmistakable thump-thump-thump sound filled the car, and her heart sank. She had been driving for 12 hours straight from Portland to Los Angeles, eager to start her new job as a marketing coordinator at a tech startup. The last thing she needed was car trouble in the middle of nowhere. She managed to guide the car to the shoulder of Highway 101, just north of San Luis Obispo. The coastal highway stretched endlessly in both directions, with sparse traffic and no gas stations in sight. Sarah turned off the engine and sat in silence for a moment, fighting back tears of frustration. She was supposed to be at her new apartment by evening, and her first day of work was tomorrow morning. Opening the car door, she stepped out to assess the damage. The front passenger tire was completely flat, the rubber sitting uselessly on the asphalt. Sarah had never changed a tire in her life. Her father had always handled car maintenance, and during college she had relied on roadside assistance. But her phone showed no signal bars, and the nearest town seemed miles away. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, and dark clouds were beginning to gather on the horizon. Sarah opened her trunk and stared helplessly at the spare tire, jack, and various tools that might as well have been ancient artifacts for all the good they did her. She pulled out her phone again, walking around the car to search for even a single bar of service, but found nothing. 20 minutes passed, and only a handful of cars had driven by, none slowing down to help. Sarah was beginning to panic when she heard the rumble of a pickup truck approaching from behind. She turned to see a dusty blue Ford F-150 pulling over about 30 feet behind her car. A tall man in his early 30s stepped out, wearing well-worn jeans, work boots, and a faded grey t-shirt. His dark hair was slightly messy, as if he had been running his hands through it, and he had the kind of genuine smile that immediately put people at ease. Sarah noticed his hands were calloused, the hands of someone who worked with them regularly. "Looks like you're having some trouble," he said, approaching with a friendly but respectful distance. "I'm David. Mind if I take a look?" Sarah felt a wave of relief wash over her. "I'm Sarah, and yes, please. I have no idea what I'm doing. The tire just went flat about 20 minutes ago." David crouched down next to the flat tire, examining it closely. "Looks like you hit something sharp, probably a nail or a piece of metal. The good news is it's completely repairable, but you'll need to get to a tire shop. The better news is I can get your spare on so you can make it to town." "You would do that?" Sarah asked, her voice filled with gratitude. "I mean, you don't even know me." David stood up and dusted off his hands. "My dad always taught me that you help people when they need it. Besides, I've got the time, and you clearly need the help. Where are you headed?" As David began pulling tools from his truck, Sarah found herself studying his face. There was something incredibly calming about his presence. He moved with confidence and purpose, but without any arrogance or impatience. Many people would have been frustrated by this interruption to their day, but David seemed genuinely happy to help. "Los Angeles," Sarah replied. "I'm starting a new job tomorrow morning." This was supposed to be the easy part of my move. David chuckled as he positioned the jack under her car. "Moving is never easy, but it's exciting." "What kind of work do you do?" "Marketing for a tech startup. It's my first real job out of college." Sarah watched as David efficiently loosened the lug nuts on her flat tire. His movements were practiced and sure. "What about you? Are you from around here?" "Born and raised in San Luis Obispo. I work construction during the week and help my uncle with his ranch on weekends. Not as glamorous as tech marketing, but I love what I do." Sarah was struck by how content David seemed with his life. She had spent years striving for the perfect internships, the perfect grades, the perfect job offer. Here was someone who had found satisfaction in work that many people might consider ordinary. but he spoke about it with genuine pride. The wind was picking up, and Sarah noticed the storm clouds moving closer. David worked steadily, removing the flat tire and positioning the spare. His t-shirt clung to his back with perspiration, but he never complained or showed any signs of rushing. "So what brought you to California?" David asked as he tightened the lug nuts on the spare tire. "Besides the job, I mean. Family? Adventure?" Sarah laughed, but there was a note of nervousness in it. "Mostly running away, if I'm being honest. I grew up in a small town in Oregon where everyone knows everyone else's business. My parents wanted me to take a job at the local bank and settle down with my high school boyfriend. Safe, predictable, boring. This job in LA represents everything I've been dreaming of. Independence, creativity, the chance to make something of myself." David lowered the jack, and Sarah's car settled onto the spare tire. "Nothing wrong with wanting more for yourself. Takes courage to leave everything familiar behind." As David packed up his tools, Sarah noticed how the approaching storm clouds were darkening the sky dramatically. The first few raindrops began to fall, fat and heavy. "We should probably get you on the road," David said, glancing up at the sky. "This spare will get you to San Luis Obispo. But don't drive fast on it. There's a tire shop on Higuera Street that should still be open if you hurry." Sarah felt a pang of something she couldn't quite identify. Disappointment. She didn't want this interaction to end. David had been the first genuinely kind person she had encountered in weeks of stressful moving preparations. "How much do I owe you?" she asked, reaching for her purse. David shook his head firmly. "You don't owe me anything. Just promise me you'll be careful driving on that spare tire." The rain was beginning to fall more steadily now. David jogged back to his truck, and Sarah got into her car. As she started the engine, she realized she didn't even have his phone number or last name. He was just going to disappear from her life as quickly as he had appeared. She rolled down her window as David pulled up alongside her. "David," she called over the sound of the rain. "Thank you so much. I don't know what I would have done without your help." He smiled, that genuine smile again. "Just glad I could help. Drive safe, Sarah. Good luck with the new job." As David's truck disappeared down the highway, Sarah sat for a moment in her car, engine running. She felt an unexpected sadness at watching him leave. In 30 minutes, this stranger had shown her more kindness and consideration than some people she had known for years. The drive to San Luis Obispo was slow and careful on the spare tire. Sarah found her thoughts returning again and again to David. There had been something special about him, something that made her feel safe and valued in a way she hadn't experienced before. She wondered if she would ever see him again, and was surprised by how much she hoped the answer would be yes. The tire shop was indeed still open, and the mechanic confirmed that her original tire could be repaired. While she waited, Sarah found herself telling the story of the helpful stranger to anyone who would listen. The mechanic smiled knowingly. "Sounds like you met one of the good ones," he said. "We've got plenty of folks around here who'd stop to help, but not everyone would take that much time and care with a stranger." As Sarah finally got back on the road toward Los Angeles, she couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had just happened to her. She had always been focused on her goals, her plans, her carefully constructed future. But David represented something different. He represented the possibility of connection, of kindness without expectation, of finding meaning in simple acts of service to others. The storm followed her south for another hour before finally clearing, leaving the evening sky painted in brilliant oranges and purples. Sarah drove through the gathering dusk, her mind full of questions she couldn't answer and feelings she couldn't quite name. She had been so focused on running toward her new life that she hadn't considered the possibility of running toward a person instead. By the time she reached her new apartment in Los Angeles, it was nearly midnight. As she carried boxes up the stairs to her second-floor unit, Sarah found herself hoping that David was safely home, wherever that might be. She wondered if he was thinking about her too, or if helping stranded motorists was such a regular occurrence that she had already faded from his memory. That night, as she lay on an air mattress surrounded by boxes in her empty apartment, Sarah stared at the ceiling and replayed every moment of their encounter. She realized that for the first time in months she wasn't thinking about her job, or her career goals, or her 5-year plan. She was thinking about a man with kind eyes and calloused hands who had stopped to help a stranger without expecting anything in return. She fell asleep wondering if their paths would ever cross again, not knowing that fate had already set larger wheels in motion. 2 weeks had passed since Sarah's encounter with David on Highway 101, but she found herself thinking about him at the strangest moments. During her morning coffee, she would remember his easy smile, While sitting in traffic, she would think about his calm competence with the tire change. Even during important meetings at her new job, her mind would occasionally drift to wondering what he was doing at that very moment. Sarah had thrown herself into her work at TechFlow Solutions, determined to prove herself valuable to the small but ambitious startup. The office was a converted warehouse in Venice Beach, filled with exposed brick walls, modern furniture, and the constant hum of creative energy. Her colleagues were brilliant and driven, exactly the kind of people she had imagined working with when she dreamed of her California career. But despite achieving everything she had planned for, Sarah felt strangely unsettled. She had expected to feel triumphant, fulfilled, complete. Instead, she found herself missing things about her old life that she had never valued before. The genuine connections with people, the sense of community, the feeling that individual kindness mattered. Her best friend from college, Jessica, had been texting regularly to check on her adjustment to Los Angeles life. During one of their evening phone calls, Jessica picked up on Sarah's restless mood. "You sound different," Jessica observed. "I mean, you're doing well at work, you love your apartment, you're living your dream in LA. But there's something in your voice. What aren't you telling me?" Sarah found herself recounting the story of David and the flat tire for what felt like the 100th time. As she spoke, she realized that she had been unconsciously looking for him everywhere she went. Every blue pickup truck made her heart skip. Every tall, dark-haired man in work clothes caused her to do a double take. "Sarah," Jessica said gently, "you know you're never going to see this guy again, right? You don't even know his last name. San Luis Obispo is 3 hours away. You need to stop fantasizing about some random Good Samaritan and start dating actual available men in your actual city." Jessica was right, of course. Sarah had always been practical, logical, goal-oriented. This fixation on a stranger made no sense. But every time she tried to put David out of her mind, she would remember the way he had looked at her with such genuine concern, or the way he had refused payment for his help, and the feelings would come rushing back. The following Saturday, Sarah decided to take Jessica's advice and start exploring LA's dating scene. She agreed to meet her co-worker Amanda at a trendy bar in Manhattan Beach, hoping that a night out would help her reset her perspective and open her mind to new possibilities. The bar was packed with young professionals, all perfectly dressed and radiating the kind of confident ambition that Sarah had once found attractive. Amanda introduced her to several men throughout the evening, each successful in his own right. There was Michael, a venture capitalist with an expensive watch and strong opinions about cryptocurrency. There was Jake, an entertainment lawyer, who name-dropped celebrities and talked extensively about his workout routine. There was Ryan, a software engineer who seemed nice enough but spent most of their conversation checking his phone. Each interaction felt hollow to Sarah. The conversations were polished but superficial. Everyone was performing a version of themselves designed to impress rather than connect. Sarah found herself comparing each man to David, remembering how natural and unguarded their roadside conversation had been. Around 11 o'clock, Sarah excused herself and stepped outside for some fresh air. The beach was just a block away, and she could hear the sound of waves in the distance. She was checking her phone when she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Sarah?" She turned around, and her heart nearly stopped. David was standing 10 feet away, looking just as surprised as she felt. He was dressed more formally than when they had met, wearing dark jeans and a button-down shirt, but his smile was exactly as she remembered it. "David!" Sarah felt a rush of joy that she couldn't have hidden if she had tried. "What are you doing here? I thought you lived in San Luis Obispo." David walked closer, his eyes lighting up with genuine pleasure at seeing her. "I do, but I'm here with my sister. She lives in Redondo Beach, and tonight was her birthday party. We just finished dinner at a restaurant down the street." He paused, studying her face with obvious happiness. "I can't believe it's you. I've been wondering how you were doing, whether you made it to LA okay, how the new job was going." "You have?"
Sarah felt her cheeks flush with warmth.
"I've been thinking about you too. I mean, thinking about that day. Grateful for your help." They stood there for a moment, both smiling, both clearly pleased by this unexpected reunion. Sarah was acutely aware of how different this felt from every interaction she had had in the bar. With David, she didn't feel the need to perform or impress. She just felt like herself. "How is the job going?" David asked. "Are you settling in okay?" "It's good. Really good, actually. The work is challenging and the people are great." Sarah hesitated, then decided to be honest. "But LA is more overwhelming than I expected. Everything moves so fast here. Sometimes I miss the simplicity of smaller places." David nodded thoughtfully. "I've lived in cities before, and I always felt like I was swimming upstream. Too much noise, too much competition. Too much focus on what you do instead of who you are. That's why I moved back home. Where did you live before? Sarah was fascinated by this glimpse into David's background. Denver for 2 years after college, then Phoenix for another year. I was working for a big construction company, making good money, living in nice apartments. But I felt disconnected from everything that mattered to me. Family, community, purpose beyond just climbing the ladder. Sarah found herself hanging on his every word. Here was someone who had made the opposite choice from hers. Someone who had chosen roots over ambition, connection over advancement. She had never met anyone who spoke so thoughtfully about these kinds of decisions. Do you ever regret it? She asked. Moving back, I mean. Don't you wonder what might have happened if you had stayed? David considered this seriously, sometimes. But I've learnt that happiness isn't about maximizing your opportunities. It's about finding the life that fits who you actually are, not who you think you should be. Before Sarah could respond, a young woman with David's dark hair and warm eyes approached them from the restaurant. There you are, she said to David, then turned to Sarah with curious interest. And who's this? Maria. This is Sarah. Sarah, my sister Maria. Sarah is the woman I told you about, the one with the flat tire. Maria's eyes widened with recognition and delight. The flat tire girl! Oh my goodness, David talked about you for days after that happened. I was beginning to think he had imagined you. Sarah felt her cheeks grow warm again, but this time with pleasure rather than embarrassment. David had talked about her? For days? David shot his sister a look that was equal parts affection and exasperation. Maria has no filter, he explained to Sarah. It's one of her most endearing and terrifying qualities. I think it's refreshing, Sarah laughed. Most people I've met in LA are so careful about what they say, worried about maintaining the perfect image. See? Maria said to David triumphantly. I told you she sounded like our kind of people. The three of them talked easily for the next 30 minutes, standing outside the bar as the Saturday night crowd flowed around them. Sarah learnt that Maria was a teacher who had moved to LA for graduate school and stayed for love. David shared stories about his construction work and his uncle's ranch, painting pictures of a life that sounded both simple and deeply satisfying. When Maria excused herself to call her husband and arrange a ride home, David and Sarah found themselves alone again.
I should probably get back to my friend, Sarah said reluctantly, glancing toward the bar.
She's going to wonder where I disappeared to. Of course, David said, but he made no move to leave. Sarah, I hope this doesn't sound too forward, but would you maybe like to have dinner sometime? I come down to LA occasionally to visit Maria, and I'd love to continue this conversation. Sarah felt her heart race with excitement and nervousness. I would really like that, she said. But can I ask you something? Why me? I mean, you hardly know me. David was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. That day on the highway, there was something about you that I couldn't stop thinking about. You were stressed and frustrated, but you never took it out on me. You were grateful without being overly dramatic. You seemed real in a way that's hard to find. He paused, and talking to you now, I feel more like myself than I have in a long time. Sarah felt something shift inside her chest, like puzzle pieces falling into place. I know exactly what you mean, she said quietly. I feel it too. They exchanged phone numbers, and David promised to call her during the week to make plans. As they said goodbye, Sarah felt lighter than she had in weeks, not just because of the romantic possibility, though that was certainly exciting, but because David represented something she hadn't realized she was searching for. Authenticity, depth, the possibility of connection based on genuine compatibility rather than shared ambition or surface attraction. Back inside the bar, Amanda was full of questions about Sarah's long absence. I met someone, Sarah said simply. Here? Tonight? Which one was it? The lawyer seemed really interested in you. Not here, Sarah said, smiling to herself. Someone from before, someone I thought I'd never see again. For the rest of the evening, Sarah went through the motions of socializing, but her mind was entirely focused on David. She replayed their conversation, analyzing every word, every expression, every moment of connection. She thought about what he had said about finding the life that fits who you actually are, and she wondered if she was brave enough to consider that her carefully planned future might not be the only path to happiness. That night, as she lay in bed in her Venice Beach apartment, Sarah stared out her window at the city lights and thought about small towns and ranches and men who stopped to help strangers without expecting anything in return. For the first time since moving to Los Angeles, she allowed herself to imagine a different kind of future. One that might include someone who valued kindness over ambition, authenticity over achievement. She fell asleep with David's phone number saved in her phone and hope growing in her heart. She didn't know where this unexpected connection might lead, but she was finally ready to find out. The next morning, Sarah woke up to a text message from David. "Thank you for such a wonderful surprise last night. I hope you have a great Sunday. Looking forward to our dinner." Sarah smiled as she read the message, feeling a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the California sunshine streaming through her windows. Maybe Jessica was wrong. Maybe some random encounters were actually the universe's way of putting you exactly where you needed to be. David called on Tuesday evening, just as he had promised. Sarah had been checking her phone obsessively all day, torn between excitement and anxiety about their planned dinner date. When his name finally appeared on her screen, she felt her stomach flutter with nervous anticipation. "Hi, Sarah." David's warm voice filled her ear. "How was your day?" "Good. Busy. We're launching a new product campaign at work, so it's been pretty intense." Sarah settled into her couch, surprised by how natural it felt to talk to him. "How about you? What does a Tuesday look like in the life of David?" David chuckled. "Started at 6 this morning working on a custom home in Pismo Beach. We're doing all the finish carpentry, so it's detailed work. Tedious sometimes, but I love seeing the house come together piece by piece." Sarah found herself genuinely interested in the specifics of his work, asking questions about the house, the timeline, the craftsmanship involved. She had never dated anyone who worked with their hands, and there was something appealing about David's tangible, meaningful labor that stood in sharp contrast to her own abstract marketing campaigns. "So about dinner," David said after they had talked for nearly an hour. "I was thinking of coming down this Saturday if that works for you. Maria recommended a restaurant in Manhattan Beach that's supposed to be great, but I'm open to suggestions." "Saturday sounds perfect," Sarah said, then hesitated. "Actually, would you be interested in cooking instead? I know it sounds weird for a first date, but I have this amazing kitchen in my apartment that I never use, and I love cooking when I have the time." "That sounds even better," David replied without hesitation. "What can I bring? I make a pretty decent salad, and I could pick up some wine." Sarah was struck by how easy this was. No games, no complicated negotiations about restaurant choices or timing. Just two people making simple plans to spend time together. It felt refreshingly mature after months of LA dating experiences that resembled elaborate performance art. When Saturday evening arrived, Sarah found herself more nervous than she had been for any date in years. She had spent the afternoon preparing homemade pasta and sauce, cleaned her apartment twice, and changed clothes 4 times before settling on a simple sundress that made her feel both comfortable and pretty. David arrived exactly on time, carrying a bottle of wine and a grocery bag. He looked even more handsome than she remembered, wearing khaki pants and a navy blue button-down shirt that brought out his eyes. But what struck Sarah most was how genuinely happy he seemed to see her. "I brought ingredients for salad like I promised," he said, holding up the grocery bag. "And I may have gotten carried away at the farmer's market and bought some strawberries for dessert." Sarah's apartment was small but thoughtfully decorated, with plants on every windowsill and books stacked on every surface. David took his time looking around, examining her bookshelf and asking about her photographs. "You read a lot," he observed, running his finger along the spines of her books. Guilty. "I was that kid who always had a book with her. My parents used to worry that I was too antisocial, always reading instead of playing outside." "What's wrong with reading?" David asked, pulling out a worn copy of The Alchemist. "This is one of my favorites. I must have read it 5 times. Sarah felt a little thrill of connection. Most of the men she had dated in LA dismissed her reading habit as quaint or old-fashioned. "Really? What do you love about it?" "The idea that when you really want something, the universe conspires to help you achieve it," David said, then paused with a slight smile. "Actually, I've been thinking about that a lot lately." They moved to the kitchen, where David proved to be an excellent sous chef, washing vegetables and setting the table while Sarah finished the pasta. Their conversation flowed effortlessly from books to travel to family stories. David talked about growing up with 3 sisters and how they had taught him to be comfortable around strong women. Sarah shared stories about her overprotective parents and her struggle to establish independence. "They mean well," Sarah said as they sat down to eat. "But they've never understood my need to experience life beyond the town where I grew up. They think I'm being reckless and ungrateful." "Are you close to them otherwise?" David asked, serving himself some of Sarah's homemade marinara sauce. "We used to be. But ever since I announced I was moving to California, there's been this tension. They keep waiting for me to come to my senses and move home. They think this is all just a phase I'm going through. David was quiet for a moment, twirling pasta on his fork. What if it's not a phase? What if this is who you really are, someone who needs room to grow and explore? Sarah felt something in her chest loosen with relief. That's exactly how I feel, but I've never had anyone understand it before. Everyone either thinks I'm crazy for leaving home or crazy for missing it sometimes. You can be grateful for where you came from and still need something different for yourself, David said. That's not ungrateful, that's honest. As the evening progressed, Sarah found herself marveling at how comfortable she felt with David. There were no awkward silences, no pressure to be impressive or witty. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing childhood stories, debating books they had both read, and discovering unexpected commonalities. When David mentioned that he had studied literature in college before switching to construction, Sarah was fascinated. Really? That's such an interesting combination. What made you change directions? David laughed, but there was something thoughtful in his expression. I loved studying literature, but I realized I needed to do something with my hands as well as my mind. My dad always said that a man should be able to build something, fix something, create something tangible. I thought he was old-fashioned, but after 2 years of analyzing other people's creativity, I wanted to make something myself. So you found a way to combine both, Sarah observed. You're still using your mind, but you're also creating beautiful spaces for people to live in. I never thought about it that way, but you're right. David's eyes lit up with appreciation for her perspective. You see things clearly. I like that about you. After dinner, they moved to Sarah's small balcony, which overlooked a tree-lined street. The evening air was warm, and they could hear the distant sound of waves from the nearby beach. David had brought his guitar from the car, and he played softly while they talked. This is probably going to sound corny, Sarah said, leaning back in her chair. But I feel more relaxed tonight than I have since I moved to LA. Usually I'm always thinking about work or networking or what I should be doing to advance my career. But right now, I'm just here, present. David's fingers stilled on the guitar strings. You don't sound corny at all. I feel the same way. Like I can just be myself without having to prove anything or impress anyone. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Sarah watching David's hands move across the guitar strings. David stealing glances at Sarah's face in the soft balcony light. There was an intimacy to the moment that felt both new and familiar, as if they were rediscovering something they had lost rather than finding something entirely unknown. Can I ask you something personal? Sarah said eventually. Of course. Have you ever been in love? Really deeply in love? David stopped playing and looked at her directly. Once. Her name was Elena. We were together for almost 3 years. I thought we were going to get married. What happened? She got accepted to medical school at UCLA. I wasn't ready to leave San Luis Obispo, and she wasn't willing to postpone her dreams. We tried long distance for about 6 months, but it was too hard. We wanted different lives. Sarah felt a pang of something that might have been jealousy, followed by curiosity. Do you ever regret not following her to LA? David considered this carefully. For a long time, I thought I did. I wondered if I had been too stubborn, too attached to my comfortable life. But now I think we were just incompatible in a fundamental way. She needed the excitement and opportunities of a big city. I need the connection and community of a smaller place. Neither of us was wrong, but we couldn't both be right together. That must have been heartbreaking. It was, but it also taught me something important about myself. I learned that I can't be happy trying to be someone I'm not, even for love. The right person will want the same kind of life I want, or at least be willing to build something together that works for both of us. Sarah felt a flutter of something that might have been hope or fear or both. What kind of life do you want, David? David set down his guitar and turned to face her fully. I want partnership, real partnership, with someone who sees me clearly and likes what she sees. I want to build something meaningful together, whether that's a business or a family or just a life that matters. I want to wake up every day grateful for the person next to me and go to sleep every night knowing I made her day a little better. Sarah felt her breath catch. She had dated men who wanted to conquer the world, men who wanted to accumulate wealth and status and power, but she had never met anyone who spoke so thoughtfully about love as a creative act, a daily choice to build something beautiful together. What about you? David asked. What do you want, besides career success? Sarah realized she had never articulated this to herself, let alone to someone else.
I want to matter, she said slowly.
not just professionally, but personally. I want to be seen and known and valued for who I really am, not just what I can accomplish. I want to create something lasting, something that makes the world a little better. And you think that has to happen in LA? Sarah paused, surprised by the question. I don't know. I used to think so. But lately I'm wondering if I was confusing the location with the feeling. Maybe what I really want is the courage to be authentically myself. And that could happen anywhere. They talked until nearly midnight, sharing dreams and fears and observations about life that neither had ever spoken aloud before. When David finally said he should head back to his hotel, Sarah felt genuinely disappointed that the evening was ending. I had the most wonderful time tonight, David said as they stood at her door. Would you maybe like to do this again? I would love that, Sarah replied, meaning it completely. David leaned forward and kissed her gently on the cheek, a gesture that was both respectful and intimate. I'll call you tomorrow, he promised. After David left, Sarah sat on her couch replaying every moment of the evening. She felt energized and peaceful at the same time, as if something important had shifted in her understanding of herself and what she wanted from life. For months, she had been focused on proving herself in LA, on building the career she had always planned. But tonight had reminded her that there were other kinds of success, other ways to measure a meaningful life. She thought about David's question about whether what she wanted had to happen in LA, and she realized she didn't know the answer. What she did know was that she wanted to find out where this connection with David might lead, even if it complicated all her carefully laid plans. That night, Sarah dreamed of small towns and guitar music, and hands that could both build houses and play beautiful melodies. She woke up the next morning with David's phone number in her hand, and a new kind of hope in her heart. 3 months had passed since Sarah and David's first dinner together, and their relationship had developed into something deeper and more meaningful than either had expected. David made the 3-hour drive to Los Angeles every other weekend, and Sarah had visited San Luis Obispo twice, staying in a charming bed and breakfast near the coast, while David showed her his world. The contrast between their lives became more apparent with each visit. Sarah's days were filled with client meetings, campaign deadlines, and the constant buzz of startup energy. Her colleagues worked long hours and socialized at trendy restaurants and exclusive networking events. Success was measured in metrics, growth rates, and market share. David's life moved to a different rhythm. His workdays began before sunrise and ended when the light faded, but his evenings were his own. He had dinner with his family every Sunday, helped coach his nephew's Little League team, and spent Saturday mornings at the farmer's market where he knew every vendor by name. Success was measured in relationships, craftsmanship, and community contribution. Despite these differences, or perhaps because of them, Sarah found herself falling deeply in love with David. He brought out parts of her personality that she had forgotten existed. With him, she laughed more easily, worried less about appearances, and felt connected to something larger than her own ambitions. But the growing intensity of her feelings also brought growing complications. Her parents had finally met David during a weekend visit to San Luis Obispo, and while they liked him personally, they were concerned about Sarah's increasing attachment to someone whose life was so different from the future they had envisioned for her. He's a lovely young man, her mother had said during one of their weekly phone calls. But Sarah, you've worked so hard to build your career in Los Angeles. Are you really going to throw that away for someone you've known for 3 months? Her father was more direct. Construction workers don't make the kind of money you'll need for the lifestyle you want. And what happens when you want to travel the world or buy a nice house or send your kids to good colleges? You need to think practically about your future. Even Sarah's friends at work were beginning to express concerns. Amanda had been particularly vocal during a recent girls' night out. I just don't understand the appeal, Amanda had said, after hearing about Sarah's latest weekend in San Luis Obispo. You're young, successful, living in one of the most exciting cities in the world. Why are you wasting time driving 3 hours each way to visit some small-town guy who's never going to be able to keep up with you professionally? Sarah had tried to explain what she saw in David, but her words had felt inadequate. How could she describe the way he listened to her, really listened, without trying to fix her problems or one-up her stories? How could she convey the peace she felt when they walked on the beach together, or the pride she saw in his eyes when he showed her a house he had helped build? The pressure from others might have been easier to ignore if Sarah herself wasn't struggling with similar doubts. She loved David, but she also loved her career. She was finally achieving the professional recognition she had always wanted. Just last week, her boss had hinted at a possible promotion that would come with significant travel requirements and even more responsibility. The internal conflict came to a head during David's visit in early December. He had arrived Friday evening in an unusually quiet mood, and Sarah sensed something was bothering him. Is everything okay? She asked as they sat down to the dinner she had prepared. You seem distracted. David looked at her with an expression that was part love, part sadness. Sarah, I need to talk to you about something important, and I'm not sure how you're going to react. Sarah felt her stomach clench with anxiety. What is it? My uncle wants to retire, and he's offered to sell me his ranch. It's been in our family for 60 years, and he doesn't have any children to pass it on to. He's giving me first right of refusal before he puts it on the market. David, that's wonderful, Sarah said, though she wasn't sure why he looked so troubled. You've always talked about how much you love that ranch. It is wonderful, and it's also terrifying. The ranch would be a full-time commitment. I'd have to give up construction work, at least the bigger projects that take me away for weeks at a time. And Sarah. He reached across the table and took her hands. I'd be tied to San Luis Obispo, permanently. No more flexibility to travel or relocate or follow opportunities in other places. Sarah felt the implications of his words settle over her like a heavy blanket. When does your uncle need an answer? By the end of January. He wants to finalize everything before tax season. They spent the rest of the weekend discussing the ranch opportunity, but Sarah could feel an unspoken tension growing between them. David was clearly excited about the possibility of owning the land he had loved since childhood, but he was also worried about what it would mean for their relationship. On Sunday morning, as they walked along Manhattan Beach, David finally addressed the elephant in the room. Sarah, if I buy the ranch, what does that mean for us? I know your life is here in LA. Your job, your friends, your career goals. I can't ask you to give all that up for me. Sarah had been dreading this conversation, but she also knew they couldn't avoid it any longer. I don't know, she said honestly. I love you, David. I love you more than I've ever loved anyone. But I also don't know if I'm ready to leave everything I've worked for. What if we tried long distance for a while longer? Until you're more established in your career, or until I figure out if ranch life is really what I want. Sarah had thought about this possibility, but she knew it wasn't realistic. We were already doing long distance, and it's hard enough with you just 3 hours away and still able to travel. If you take on the ranch, you'll be tied down completely. And my job is getting more demanding, not less. We'd see each other maybe once a month if we're lucky. David stopped walking and turned to face her. So what are you saying? That if I buy the ranch, we're over? I'm saying I don't know how to make this work, Sarah replied, tears starting to form in her eyes. I'm saying that maybe we want fundamentally incompatible things just like you and Elena did. Don't compare this to Elena, David said, his voice sharp with hurt. What Elena and I had was nothing like what you and I have. She and I never really understood each other. You and I, we see each other clearly. We bring out the best in each other. That's not something you just walk away from. But maybe love isn't enough, Sarah said, the words feeling like glass in her throat. Maybe my parents and my friends are right. Maybe I'm being naive to think that two people from such different worlds can build a life together. David was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the ocean. When he finally spoke, his voice was gentle but firm. Sarah, I won't pretend that our different backgrounds don't create challenges, but I also won't accept that they make us incompatible. The question isn't whether we come from different worlds. The question is whether we want to build a new world together. What would that look like? Sarah asked, though she wasn't sure she was ready for the answer. I don't know yet. Maybe you could find work that allows you to be based in San Luis Obispo but travel to LA regularly. Maybe I could find ways to make the ranch profitable enough that we could afford for you to start your own consulting business. Maybe we could spend part of the year in each place. I don't have all the answers, but I'm willing to get creative if you are. Sarah felt torn between hope and fear. Everything David was suggesting sounded wonderful in theory, but would it work in practice? Could she really build the career she wanted from a small town? Could David really make enough money from a ranch to support the kind of life she had imagined for herself? I need time to think, Sarah said finally. This is the biggest decision I've ever had to make, and I don't want to make it based on emotion alone. How much time? David asked, and Sarah could hear the vulnerability in his voice, until after the holidays. I need to get through this product launch at work, and I want to spend Christmas with my parents. I need to figure out what I really want my life to look like, separate from what other people want for me. David nodded, though Sarah could see the disappointment in his eyes. I understand. But Sarah, while you're thinking, I want you to consider something. All your life, you've made decisions based on what you thought you should want. The right college, the right job, the right city. But when have you ever made a decision based simply on what makes you happy? That evening after David had left for San Luis Obispo, Sarah sat in her apartment trying to process everything that had happened. She loved David, but she also feared giving up the independence she had fought so hard to achieve. She valued the career she was building, but she was beginning to wonder if professional success alone would be enough to sustain her happiness. The next few weeks passed in a blur of work deadlines and holiday preparations. Sarah threw herself into the product launch with even more intensity than usual, staying late at the office and taking on extra responsibilities. Her colleagues praised her dedication, and her boss mentioned the promotion opportunity again. But at night, alone in her apartment, Sarah found herself missing David with an ache that surprised her with its intensity. She missed their long phone conversations and their easy companionship. She missed the way he made her feel grounded and valued for who she was rather than what she accomplished. 2 weeks before Christmas, Sarah received an unexpected phone call from David's sister, Maria. "I hope you don't mind me calling," Maria said. "David doesn't know I'm doing this, but I wanted to talk to you about something." "Of course," Sarah replied, curious about what Maria might want to discuss. "I know David told you about the ranch opportunity, and I know you're trying to figure out what that means for your relationship. I wanted you to know that I've never seen my brother as happy as he's been since he met you. He lights up when he talks about you in a way that he never did with Elena or anyone else." Sarah felt her chest tighten with emotion. "I care about him too, Maria, more than I've ever cared about anyone, but I'm scared." "Of course you are. Big decisions are scary. But Sarah, can I tell you something about my brother? He's the most thoughtful, most loyal person I know. If he says he wants to build a life with you, he means it. And if he says he'll find a way to make it work, he will. David doesn't make promises lightly." After hanging up with Maria, Sarah found herself thinking about David's question. When had she ever made a decision based simply on what made her happy? The truth was, she never had. Every major choice in her life had been driven by external expectations or logical analysis of pros and cons. But when she was with David, logic seemed less important than joy. When she was in his arms, professional ambition seemed less urgent than the desire to build something meaningful together. When she imagined her future, increasingly the images that brought her the most happiness included him. As Christmas approached, Sarah realized she was facing the first truly important decision of her adult life. Not the decision she thought she should make, not the decision that would look best on paper, but the decision that would determine whether she had the courage to pursue authentic happiness, even when it meant letting go of the life she had always planned. Christmas morning found Sarah sitting at her childhood kitchen table in Oregon, watching her parents prepare their traditional holiday breakfast. The familiar routines should have been comforting, but instead Sarah felt restless and conflicted. She had been home for 3 days, and every conversation seemed to circle back to her relationship with David and the choices she was facing. Her parents had been careful not to be too direct in their criticism, but their concern was obvious. They had worked hard to provide Sarah with opportunities they never had, and they couldn't understand why she would consider giving up her promising career for a man she had known for less than 6 months. "Honey, you know we just want you to be happy," her mother said, setting a plate of pancakes in front of Sarah. "But you've always been so focused on your goals. We're worried that you're getting swept up in romance and not thinking practically about your future." Sarah pushed the pancakes around on her plate, her appetite gone. "What if being practical isn't the same thing as being happy?" she asked. "What if I've been so focused on building the life I thought I should want that I never considered whether it's the life I actually do want?" Her father looked up from his coffee with concern. "Sarah, you've been in Los Angeles less than 6 months. That's not enough time to know whether you like the life you're building there or not. Don't make permanent decisions based on temporary feelings." But Sarah was beginning to suspect that her feelings for David weren't temporary at all.
If anything, the weeks of separation had made her more certain that what they had together was special and rare.
She missed him with an intensity that seemed to grow stronger rather than weaker with time. That afternoon, Sarah drove to her favorite childhood spot, a quiet overlook above the Willamette Valley. She had come here countless times as a teenager when she needed to think, and the familiar view still had the power to calm her mind and clarify her thoughts. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through the text messages David had sent over the past few weeks. He had been respectful of her request for space to think, but he had also made sure she knew he was thinking of her. His messages were sweet and supportive, full of little details about his days and expressions of love that never felt overwhelming or pressured. On Christmas Eve, he had sent a longer message that she had read dozens of times. "Sarah, whatever you decide about us, I want you to know that loving you has changed me in the best possible ways. You've helped me see myself more clearly and dream bigger than I ever thought possible. If you choose your career in LA, I'll be sad, but I'll understand. If you choose to build something with me, I promise I'll spend every day trying to be worthy of that choice. Either way, you've made my life better just by being in it." Reading his words again, Sarah felt the familiar ache of missing him. But she also felt something else, certainty. For the first time in weeks of agonizing over the decision, she knew what she wanted to do. She wanted to take the leap. Sarah spent the rest of Christmas Day quietly observing her extended family, looking at her aunts and uncles and cousins with new eyes. The ones who seemed happiest weren't necessarily the ones who had achieved the most conventional success. They were the ones who had found meaningful partnerships, who had built lives around love and family and community rather than individual achievement. Her Uncle Tom, who ran a small hardware store, was clearly deeply content with his life. He and his wife had raised 4 children together, were active in their church, and seemed to find joy in simple pleasures like Sunday family dinners and high school football games. Sarah had always thought of Uncle Tom as someone who had settled for less than he could have achieved. But watching him with his family, she wondered if he had actually chosen something more valuable than professional success. That evening, Sarah finally called David. She had been planning to wait until after New Year's to give him her decision, but she couldn't wait any longer. "Hi." David's voice was warm but cautious when he answered the phone. "How's Christmas with the family?" "Quiet. How about you? How was Christmas at your sister's?" Maria's kids had way too much sugar and not nearly enough sleep. But it was perfect.
David paused.
"Sarah, is everything okay? You sound different." Sarah took a deep breath. "David, I've made my decision." She heard David's sharp intake of breath. "Okay," he said quietly. "I'm ready to hear it. I want to try. I want to find a way to make this work between us. I want to help you buy that ranch and build a life together." The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long that Sarah began to worry the call had been dropped. "David, are you there?" "I'm here," David said, and she could hear the emotion in his voice. "Sarah, are you sure? I don't want you to make this decision because you feel pressured or because you think it's what I want to hear. This has to be what you want for yourself."
"It is what I want," Sarah said, feeling more certain with each word.
"I've been thinking about what you said, about making decisions based on what makes me happy instead of what I think I should want. Being with you makes me happy, David. Building a life with you makes me happy. I don't know how we'll figure out all the practical details, but I want to try. What about your job? Your career in LA?" Sarah had thought long and hard about this. "I'm going to talk to my boss after New Year's about working remotely part-time. The company is growing fast, and they might be willing to let me open a satellite office in San Luis Obispo if I can bring in clients from the Central Coast. If that doesn't work, I'll start my own consulting business. It's risky, but it's not impossible. And if your parents think you're making a mistake?" Sarah looked out at the valley where she had grown up, feeling grateful for her roots but also ready to plant new ones. "Then they'll have to trust that they raised me well enough to make good decisions for myself. I love them, but I can't live their version of my life anymore." David was quiet for another moment. "Sarah, I love you so much, more than I thought it was possible to love someone. But I need you to promise me something." "What?" "Promise me that if this doesn't work out, if you're unhappy, or if you regret giving up your LA life, you'll tell me. Don't sacrifice your dreams just to make me happy. I want to build something with you, but not at the expense of who you are." Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes at the generosity of his words. "I promise." "But David, I need you to promise me something too. Anything. Promise me that we'll keep talking honestly about what we both need to be happy. Promise me that we'll keep figuring this out together instead of making assumptions about what the other person wants." "I promise," David said without hesitation. They talked for another hour, making tentative plans for Sarah's move and discussing the ranch purchase timeline. By the time they hung up, Sarah felt both exhilarated and terrified. She was about to upend her entire carefully planned life for love, and she had no guarantee that it would work out. But for the first time in months, she also felt truly excited about her future. The conversation with her parents the next morning was as difficult as Sarah had expected. Her mother cried. Her father lectured her about financial security, and both of them worried aloud that she was making the biggest mistake of her life. "I understand why you're concerned," Sarah said as calmly as she could. "But I need you to trust that I've thought this through carefully. I'm not giving up my career. I'm just changing how I pursue it. And I'm not throwing my life away for a man. I'm choosing to build a life with a man I love and respect. But what if it doesn't work out? Her mother asked through her tears. What if you break up in 6 months and you've given up everything for nothing? Then I'll figure out what comes next, Sarah said. Mom, Dad, I know this isn't the choice you would make, but it's the right choice for me. I can feel it in my bones. Her father was quiet for a long time before finally speaking. Sarah, your mother and I have always been proud of your independence and your strength. If this is really what you want, if you've really thought it through, then we'll support you. It might take us some time to understand it, but we'll support you. Sarah felt a wave of relief and gratitude. She knew her parents' concerns came from love, and she didn't need them to understand her choice completely. She just needed them to trust her to make it. The flight back to Los Angeles felt different than any trip Sarah had ever taken. Instead of flying toward her future, she felt like she was flying toward the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. She spent the entire flight making lists of things she needed to accomplish in the next month, have the conversation with her boss, start looking for clients on the Central Coast, research the logistics of moving to a small town while maintaining professional connections in a major city. But underneath the practical planning, Sarah felt a deep sense of rightness about her decision. She thought about David's question about when she had ever made a choice based simply on what made her happy. This was that choice. For the first time in her adult life, she was choosing love over logic, partnership over individual achievement, authentic happiness over external validation. It was terrifying and exhilarating and absolutely right. When Sarah's plane landed in Los Angeles, she found a text message from David waiting for her. Welcome home, soon-to-be ranch partner. I love you more than words can say. Sarah smiled as she read the message, feeling her heart swell with love and anticipation. She was about to embark on the greatest adventure of her life, and she couldn't wait to begin. 6 months later, Sarah stood in the kitchen of the ranch house she and David had spent the spring renovating together. Through the window, she could see David working with the horses in the corral, his face relaxed and happy in the golden afternoon light. Her laptop was open on the kitchen table, showing the preliminary designs for a marketing campaign for a winery in Paso Robles, one of several Central Coast clients she had acquired since starting her own consulting business. The life they had built together was nothing like what Sarah had originally planned, but it was everything she hadn't known she wanted. She had traded the excitement of Los Angeles for the satisfaction of meaningful work and deep partnership. She had exchanged the possibility of rapid professional advancement for the reality of building something lasting with someone she loved completely. Some mornings, Sarah still felt a flutter of uncertainty about the choices she had made, but every evening, when she and David sat on their front porch watching the sunset over the mountains, she knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right decision. Love had won, and in winning, it had given them both everything they hadn't even known they were looking for.